Council. I'm Tom Anderson. I'm a city councilor and I'm the chair. And could the other council members identify themselves, please?
Councilor Stapleton from Ward 1.
Councilor Phillips from Ward 3.
Councilor Gonzalez, Ward 5.
Terrific. Thank you very much. I will tell you that I'm down to one computer screen for various problems. And so I'm going to have to be toggling back and forth between the agenda and the council meeting itself. And that may be a little awkward. I think, Mr. Barron, the first item is approval of minutes.
Yes, we called it to order, and then the approval of the January 25th, 2020.
Okay, as the chair, I will take a matter of personal privilege and indicate that someone spelled my name wrong. It's right many places, Andersen, but there are some places when it is Anderson, and I don't know that guy. So I would make that a minor amendment to the minutes, and I'm sure it's not going to happen again. Is there a second to my motion to approve the minutes?
Second.
Any further discussion? Could the recorder call the roll, please?
Member Leung.
Jackie, you're muted.
Yep, I'm here.
Member Leung is an alternate and she's not participating in the discussion or votes. Otherwise,
Okay.
we'd have a quorum of council.
Okay.
Okay, thank you. Member Stapleton.
Aye.
Member Phillips.
Here.
No,
Member, oh,
Sorry.
you're voting.
Voting. Sorry. Yeah.
minutes. It's okay.
Aye. Sorry.
No, it's okay. Don't worry. Member Gonzalez.
Aye.
And Chair Anderson.
Aye.
Perfect. Thank you.
During the course of this, I've been trying to toggle back and forth and I can't do it. So I have no idea what the next item is on the agenda, but I'm sure it's going to be some sort of report from Mr. Barron.
Well, it's actually public comment.
Okay. Okay. Thank you. Is there any member of the public who's here who wishes to comment?
Kelly or Shannon, has anybody signed up in the last couple hours?
Nope, no one at all.
So having no members of the public commenting, we move on to the next agenda item of an unknown matter, but I'm sure Mr. Barron knows what it is.
I have two action items coming up under number 4 on your agenda. It's the auditor's RFP and a refunding or refinancing opportunity that we have. Let's cover the auditing RFP. A few years back, the city council had put into the Salem Revised Code that it shouldn't be responsible for awarding the auditor's contract. But in addition, the approval of the RFP, the solicitation for bids. And so that's what you have before you tonight is the auditor's request for proposals. And it's located on pages. Oh, by the way, I just wanted to let everybody know, since we're kind of a new group, is the meeting request that's sent to each of you will have this agenda attached. So you can take it from the meeting request, or you could go to the Finance Committee website. It's also posted there. But just because we've had power outages and all sorts of things going on in the last few weeks, I went ahead and sent an email with an attachment. But what we did something a little different this time is, well, what I've found in a lot of the agendas and the supporting paperwork is the supporting paperwork has its own page numbers. And in this case, we have a 98-page package. So I asked the staff to put in the lower left-hand corner, it says package page 1 of 98. So rather than everybody saying, well, is it the item page 7 or is it the package page 7 or whatever, I just had every page numbered in the lower left-hand corner, including the agenda. So if you look at your agenda in the lower left-hand corner, it's going to say package page 1 of 98. The reason why I bring this up now is because the auditor's RFP begins on page 3 and it runs through page 46 of the package. A couple of things, rather than, what is that, 43, 44 pages, rather than going through that, I thought I'd just highlight some things. On page 8, you'll see that our last year cost was $90,300. So that's just a gauge. We don't know what bids we're going to get and how much they are. I can tell you from personal experience that auditing firms, if they're new to the city, pretty much lose money on their first year because they not only have to audit that year's financials, they have to go back and make sure that they're comfortable with everything that's been done prior. So typically in their first year, they spend a lot more hours than they're being reimbursed for. But we're looking for a 5-year contract and for them to bid on each of the years, whether it's a flat rate for all of the years or whether it's a flat rate in the first year going up by an inflation index. We don't know what we're going to receive, but I wanted to start you all off with that's how much we paid last year is the $90,300. That's on page 8. And then on page 15 through 19, we have a scoring mechanism. The price is only one part of the scoring mechanism. They're broken out into 350 different points that we will award, and we will review the responses and then bring them back as a recommendation to you and explain our recommendation. We will provide you with all of the results because ultimately it's your decision on who we award the contract to. So I emphasize the scoring mechanism because you'll notice that price is not the driving factor. It's experience. It's all of the things listed on pages 15 through 19. And then on page 20, we have a little bit of a calendar of events. Provided that you approve this, it's an action item, so we'll call for a vote. Provided you approve for it, we'll put it on the street tomorrow. We'll give them a little over a month and ask that they have their bids back by, let's see, this is February, so March 26th. And then the next Finance Committee meeting is April 26th. That's by that time, we will have run through all of the RFPs. We will have reached out to them if there's anything incomplete or there's clarification necessary. And we will have a recommendation for you on April 26th. We hope to award it in late April or early May for the fiscal year that concludes June 30th. So it's we're not rushed. This is perfect timing. But that's what the RFP says. I think it's pretty standard RFP. I think the larger discussion will be on that April 26th Finance Committee meeting where we tell you the people that responded and what our recommendations are. If there are no questions, I do need a vote to approve for me to put this RFP out on the street tomorrow.
Are there any questions any council member has of Mr. Barron? If so, raise your hand. Having seen none, the chair has a question or two. Is this the same report that we got from Grove, Muller, and Swank last meeting? I mean, that's the audit. They did the audit that you're sending out for bid now.
This is a request for a proposal.
Right.
To do that.
To do it again for the next 5 years.
Like Grove, Muller, Swank, they had a 5-year contract and they just finished it. So.
And they may have another 5-year contract. It depends on how they do and all the scoring stuff, which I read, and good luck figuring out the values from 1 to 10 or whatever it is. The other thing I have to say is for $90,000, it's gonna, if they're auditors and accountants time, they charge what lawyers do, I presume. It's going to take them $90,000 just to read the thing and prepare of their time and prepare for the audit. But I guess it gets better in years 2, 3, 4, 5. So,
And thank you, Chairman, but I'll just, a shameless plug here, is you will all remember when they met with us last week,
Yeah.
they said their job is significantly easier.
Yep.
Because we produce the CAFR, whereas in many of the cities, I think she might have even said most of the cities where they have engagements, they actually have to put all the pieces together for management to review. And that's not the way it should happen. This is a management statement of, this is our financial performance, and we're asking you to audit it to make sure that there are no material misstatements. So,
well, I will tell you, Mr. Barron, that we appreciate the work the staff does, and I do remember that comment, and I'm sure it'll happen again that way. Could we have a motion to, Mr. Phillips has a question.
Yes, thank you, Chair Anderson. Your question actually got me back to my question. So I think it's your question, just re-paraphrased, but is this RFP that we're approving, has it been modified compared to 5 years ago or the last time it went out?
yes, some format, some of the things we're asking them to do have changed. The names of some of the reports that they're running just have changed. We're governed by the Government Accounting Standards Board, the GASB. There's a Federal Accounting Standards Board. Both of them happen to have been headquartered in Norwalk, Connecticut, where I was the CFO most recently. So, yeah, so we made those kind of changes, but we also dropped off what was it? Kelly, can you help me? It's the Housing Authority, I think, is that we dropped off. At one point,
Salem Housing,
yeah, the last 5 years ago, we said, hey, maybe we could get one auditing firm to do the Housing Authority and the city. And so, and then it was much more complicated, and then it asked for separate bids, and we had paragraphs in there that said we reserve the right to appoint one to one and one to another, and it just made it way more confusing. The last time around, the Housing Authority chose to use their own auditor. So just to simplify, and I think when you have a more simplified RFP, you get a better price. To simplify things, all references to the Housing Authority were eliminated as far as them providing the audit.
I'm really happy to see that this is the simplified version of the report. Do we have a motion from one of the committee members to approve the RFP and for Mr. Barron to send it out tomorrow?
Can I say so moved?
Yes, you can. That's what I was looking for. I just asked you what a lawyer would call a leading question, where I gave you the answer to the question in the question itself. Do we have a second?
Second.
Thank you. So any further discussion? Could the recorder call the roll, please?
Member Stapleton,
Aye.
Member Phillips,
Aye.
Member Gonzalez,
Aye.
Chair Anderson.
Aye.
Thank you.
The next item is 4B, and I did manage to write it down my little pad here, so now I know what it is. It's the discussion of the 2012 and 2013 bondings and putting them out for refunding, which I have asked Mr. Barron to refer to as refinancing, because it makes it sound a little easier and more understandable to those non-corporate bonding types like us. And I note that he actually did that. He corrected himself sua sponte when he was discussing this. I will also tell the rest of the members of the council that I pulled this item from the consent agenda just so Mr. Barron could discuss it for the general public about how what we are doing by doing this is saving the city corporately a lot of money, even though that may come down individually to not very much for individual homeowners. But when you add it all up, it's another example of the staff getting more bangs for our buck. So, Mr. Barron, if you'd like to talk about it a little.
Sure. In Oregon, we go to we request permission through having a bond measure where we ask the public whether we can issue this much debt, and then it will become something that we recover from them on their property tax bill as a dollars per $1,000 of assessed value on your property. So that's how we pay. It becomes a ballot measure. They approve it. We add it to the tax bill on your property tax to pay the debt. So what this does is we said, hey, we have a couple of outstanding debts for 2012 and 2013 streets and one streets and bridges to do a refunding of about $25.6 million. It's $6.4 million on the 2012 and $19.2 million on the 2013. And like Chairman Anderson said, this is a refinancing. We're going to the market and we're just getting a lower interest rate. And just like if we refinanced our house and our mortgage payment is less, the same is true on the bonds that we borrowed to do the street and bridges repairs. The cost for the money we borrowed is less. So what happens is that the amount of money we put on the tax bill is less. We're only allowed to collect from the taxpayers the amount of money it takes to make the debt service payment. And if we refinance for a lower interest rate, our debt service payment goes down. So the amount we collect in taxes goes down. So here are the big numbers, is the present value savings over refinancing one of the loans that only has 3.5 years left and the other loan that has 5.5 years left. Like I told you, it's about $25.6 million, is $1.5 million. Present value, today's savings in the reduced payments over the those two terms. And so I was trying to figure out what would make this more real for people. Well, next year's debt service is actually going to go down $437,000. So I took a look at what our grand list is, the total value of all of our assessed value. It's 17 some odd billion dollars. And I thought, well, what does that mean to me if I have a house that has an assessed value of $300,000, right? And so that $437,000 reduction in debt service drops the charge for that bond by about 3.4 cents per thousand times 300. It's a little over $10 a year for someone that owns a $300,000 assessed value home. It doesn't sound like a great deal of money, but the total money is $1.5 million savings. These refinancing opportunities are something we're constantly looking at. And we have, on one loan, we have the current promise to pay at 2.6% being dropped to about 0.8%. And on the other loan, we have an obligation currently of 3.32%, and it also is being dropped to about 0.8%. So less than 1% is what we're going to be able to refinance that 3.5-year term and that 5.5-year term. So it's pretty exciting. Chairman Anderson and I talked before the call, is that the city's not saving money. It's not like, oh, this is a reduction of our general fund, because it's just a savings to the taxpayer. So whatever we have to pay out for the debt service is all we're collecting from the taxpayer. And so it's just money in and money out, but the savings is going to the taxpayer. And we look at these opportunities frequently, and those are the numbers associated with the request that I have in front of you tonight.
Does any member of the committee have any questions for Mr. Barron?
I don't have a question per se, as just a comment of just wow. Like when I read this, one, I was like, can I get that rate on my house? But so thank you. And I think it's really important that we talk about how this is really a passed on savings to the people here in Salem, and should go to your credit for all that hard work figuring that out. So thank you. Just out of curiosity, I know when I refinance my home, there is a cost to that. Whether there's, obviously it's a home, so you have a different set of things at play, right? So you may have to have an appraisal or whatnot, but so I understand that it's a different idea, but is there a cost to refinancing this kind of bond work?
Yes, and I'm so glad you asked that question, because the 0.8, it's actually 0.85 for one of them and 0.81%. And you have to realize these are estimates, because we don't know until we actually issue the debt what our bids are. But those were the rates as of February 4th when we ran the numbers. But
The cost, she was asking about the cost.
I was trying to break it up.
Okay.
The cost is about $87,000 is what we have to do that. But the 0.8% that I'm quoting you is an all-in true interest cost. It has all closing costs, and it has all the underwriter fees. Bonds are issued in $1,000 increments. You issue 25 million. You divide that by 1,000 and you multiply that times $7. That's the estimated underwriter fee, $7 per bond. Personally, I tend to do better than that. But so that includes all closing costs and the underwriter's fee for issuing the debt. And so the net cost is 0.8%. Yeah, so that includes everything. That is our all-in cost. Our paperwork gives 3 different ticks, true interest costs. And I quote the all-in because I agree is that, there's something I wanted to say is that the present value, that $1 million, $1.5 million that I mentioned, the present value as a percentage of the refunded debt is about 5.2% is what we're achieving. And there's a rule of thumb that, you pretty much don't want to go refund debt if you're not achieving at least 2% present value savings to the refunded debt, because you get approval and you never know what the rates are going to be by the time you issue them. And so you want to have at least 2% to make sure it's worth your effort. Well, we're achieving 5.2%. So this is a good deal. This is a really good deal.
Thank you.
Well, no, in terms you explain it, it is very exciting. And I'm sure Member Gonzalez understands this a little bit, being in the real estate business. Yeah, I wish we could all get those kind of rates, but I think it has something to do with the number of zeros behind the money you're putting out there. So if there's no other discussion, we need a motion to approve the refunding/refinancing, or recommend to the council that they approve the refinancing of the 2012 and 2013 bonds. Is there such a motion?
So moved.
Is there a second? Is there any further discussion? Could the recorder call the roll, please?
Member Stapleton,
Aye.
Member Phillips,
Aye.
Member Gonzalez,
Aye.
Chair Anderson.
Aye.
Thanks.
We move on now to item 5, which is the investment report. And Mr. Barron, if you could give us the report.
Sure. And the investment report from PFM is on pages 54 through 93. But instead of going through all that detail, what I've done in previous meetings, and I did again this meeting, is extract all what I think is the meaningful data and put it in a presentation, which is pages 94 through 98. And so I am going to pull up that presentation right now. And let's see.
While you're pulling it up, I had a question about page
And
98.
then you have it available. So it looks like you're opening it up and going to share with us, right?
Are you talking to me or somebody else?
No, I'm sorry. Shannon Thomas is on the line. And when I tried to open the presentation, it said she was in it. So I think she may be opening.
So you want to do a screen share is what you're
Yes,
saying.
right.
Okay.
So
While we're waiting for that, I do have a question on pages 98, which is the totals of the various funds we have and their fluctuations. I see that over, I don't know, I think I don't have it in front of me now, but it's quarterly. I think maybe some funds go way up, some funds goes way down. I guess my question is that just seems like kind of a common occurrence. There's nothing in the fluctuation in those bottom line reports over the period of time that cause you any concern?
no, as a matter of fact, I can address that when we actually get it up on the screen.
Okay.
Some we break up the portfolios into 5 portfolios. The 2 that the city manages, the cash in the bank, and the LGIP, which is the money that we invest at the state. It's a short-term interest fund. So those are essentially the liquid assets that we manage. But we have a bond portfolio, a short-term portfolio, and a long-term portfolio. The bond portfolio, the dollars in the bond portfolio are always going to be bonded dollars. But those bonded dollars go down because of spending, but they also go down because of some bonds maturing. It's kind of, oh, great. Kind of interesting because if you have a bond that matures, they make the payment for principal and interest, whatever is left, and it gets deposited into our bank account. And so you will see a drop in the bond portfolio. And until I find an investment that's appropriate, we don't, our primary objective is not to gain the most interest. Our primary objective in government is to make sure funds are available when they're needed. So after that objective is met, then we look for the best interest rate within the parameters that the finance committee has given me on where I can invest money. The state also has requirements. But so until I take it out of the bank and reinvest it, that the balance goes down, but then some months you'll see it go back up. And it's just because we've made the investment again. So just to be clear is that the balances in the bonded portfolio are always bonded money, but the balances in the short-term investment and bank are not necessarily all general fund money, because we have to move the money from the bond portfolio into the bank in order to pay the bills on all the bonded projects. And so, so that's a brief explanation why you might see some of the portfolio values going down, but then going back up the next month.
Okay, I have another question. Someplace in the report there is a pie chart of the investments, and you know, they're in treasury bonds, they're in something else, they're in something else. Is that the portfolio mix a pretty standard mix in the industry?
Well, I would say our portfolio mix isn't an industry standard. It's driven more by what bonded projects we have out there.
Okay.
At the beginning of the library and the police projects, before any spending happened, the percentage of bonded funds was a lot greater of our total funds. But I would say in the short term and the long term portfolios, the short-term portfolio, and we have a definition on one of these slides, are going to be investments that are 0 to 12 months. The long-term portfolio is 12 months to 5 years. And so, so I would say that those balances should be relatively stable in as much as those needs are relatively the same year in and year out, you know. But that's another interesting thing. When you make an investment that's 5 years out, in year 6, it's no longer in the portfolio, right? Because now it's matured and it goes into the bank account. And then I see when I need the money. Can I put it back in the long-term portfolio, or am I going to need it in the next 12 months? And then I put it into the short-term portfolio.
Sort of equivalent to certificates of deposit. How long do you want to keep them in there with not being able to get them out? Say yes. Just
Yeah.
humor me.
It's really restrictive on what governments can use public
Sure.
money on. And we have access to all of our money whenever we want it. Now, we might not earn what we originally purchased, just like on a CD. If you were to purchase it and you would cash it in early, you have access to it, but you might not achieve what you had anticipated when you made the investment. So let's go to the next slide. I think I promised you 45 minutes, Chairman, and we're going to make good on it. This slide is not from the PFM report, but I include it because it's interesting to see, particularly last year when we had an inverted yield curve. And so typically what you'll see in a normal upward sloping curve is that you get paid less. These are US Treasuries, less for something where you're tying up your money for less time, like 3 months, you'll see a very low yield, and more for if you tie it up for a long time, like 30 years. And that's why it's upward sloping, because you have that interest risk, right? If you tie up your money now for 30 years and they give you 3%, well, who's to say in the next 30 years that same money couldn't be earning 10%, 15%, 20%. So you have interest risk. So when you agree to tie up your money for a longer period of time, you typically get a higher rate of return. Last year was an anomaly. There was so much uncertainty in the markets. No one wanted to tie up their money for any period of time beyond a year. And so what you found is you had all that money being invested in the short term, 0 to 12 months, and you were actually earning more if you invested it for 3 months than you would if you invested it for 3 years. So that was an inverted curve. But as you can see, I try to put 4 months worth of data here, is that it's still a normal upward sloping curve. But we see in February that there's been increases in the 3 to 30-year maturity. So there's a little more stability in the out years, and so they're paying a little more. And then you'll see at the very bottom of that slide is this information is sourced from EMMA, which is part of the MSRB. EMMA is Electronic Municipal Market Access is the name of it. But it is where I source this information. If you ever want to double check, you can go to that link. So the next 3 slides have all of the same data, just showing different aspects of the data. This is what we talked about earlier, where there are 5 portfolios, 2 managed by the city, the bank account and the LGIP, and there's a description of each. And then 3 that are managed by our investment advisors, PFM, which are the bond portfolio, short-term and long-term. And so you'll see in the short term, in the green, the middle green, it says we target our cash needs up to 12 months. And then in the long-term portfolio, it's 1 year up to 5 years. So I changed the colors around a little bit to make it more clear. The most recent data, the PFM report, this is all coming from the PFM report. Oh, and I just noticed I made a mistake. See adjacent to the $406 million where it says December 31st, that should say January 31st. So sorry about that. Because I have 4 months worth of data and it's showing how our total portfolio has gone from October 349 million to November up to 423 million, where we got all those property tax receipts in. We were still getting property tax receipts in December, but it's dropped $16 million by the end of January. Please forgive me, that 406,531 should be January 31st. So if we go to the next slide, I'll be able to explain some of the reasons why. So in this slide, we take a look at the same 4 years, the same 4 months, the same color coding and the value. So you could see at the end of December, our total market value was 422 million. Well, it dropped 16 million, right? It dropped to 406 million. So I wanted to give you an idea what that is. In past months, I was able to say, well, this is the monthly payroll and accounts payable, and that's true. But there's also something unique about this drop is that we had $5.4 million worth of deposits in transit, meaning that at the end of January, we had some of our investments that matured, so are no longer part of the PFM portfolio and are in transit to be deposited in our bank. But it didn't get deposited until Monday, February 1st. And so it doesn't show up in the PFM portfolio, nor does it show up in the bank portfolio because it's a deposit in transit. We had, like I said, $4.4 million that matured on the 31st and was a deposit in transit, and that we verified that it did indeed get recorded. But we also had spending on the police and library projects that totaled about $3.5 million. So between the deposits in transit, the normal spending on police and library projects, in addition to all our accounts payable, all the bills we pay and all of the payroll, we had this $16 million drop. The second part of this slide is the sector distribution. The far right column on the right side of the page says the sectors that we're allowed by our policy to invest in. Now, U.S. Treasuries are very secure, and that's what I showed on the first slide, the interest rates, they're government guaranteed. We're allowed to go 100% in there, but we happen to have 153 million of this 406 million total. So 37% of our portfolio well within the policy. And then you could see other items like federal agencies, municipal obligations, commercial paper and corporate notes. We're well within our policy limits. The LGIP, you'll notice that I have it listed as the Oregon revenue limit for how much we can put in the short-term investment fund. I think it's just a little over 51 million for each the city and what is the other one, Kelly? The I don't know why I'm drawing a blank. We have two deposit accounts, and we can go up to 51 million or 102 million, and you can see we have 95 million in there. Sometimes we'll get payments that go directly into LGIP, and we actually go over our limit, and we have to remove the money right away because we get a favorable investment return on the short-term investment fund, and they cap the amount that we can put in there. And then at the bottom, it's the collateralized deposit account. That's just our bank account. So the second part of this is just saying that our sector distribution, where we have our money invested, is well within our those that are allowed by policy. And then the last slide just shows some things, and Councilor Stapleton had some good questions about this slide that I answered earlier in the month for the last presentation. But this just gives you a little more detail. It not only gives you the security market value, what someone's willing to pay for our investments at any point of time, but it also gives you how much accrued interest that we have. A lot of our investments will say, let's say we're promised to get $120 worth of interest a year, but they pay it only 2 times a year in June and December. So we get $60 in June and $60 in December. Well, if I'm reporting in August, for example, I've received the first $60, but I've also earned July's $10 and August $10. I just haven't been paid it yet. And so this is earned but not paid interest. And so I think this is interesting to see is that we also have an additional value that as soon as our investments go to term, we have actually earned through January 31st, an additional $850,000. We just haven't got it yet. And that's why I'm not showing it, but it is nice to see it. It shows up in the PFM report. So this is just another look at those same 3 numbers, the 3 kind of peachy shaded months from October, November, and December, and then the most recent month of January, showing the market value at 406 million. So I believe that's the last slide, is it not? Okay, and looking at my my clock, I'm showing 4:44. So I think I think we did good, Chairman. So that's it on the investment summary. If anybody has any questions, I'm happy to answer them.
Virginia has a question.
Yep.
So when we look at this last slide in November, on the police line, we have security accrued and total there. And then the next in December, it's gone. And that means that we have liquidated that and paid all of our debts on that.
Oh, I'm so glad you asked that, because you would think that, right? But all it means is that all of the investments that we had in, remember our goal is to make sure the money's available when we have to pay the bills, when it's needed. So all of the investments in the police portfolio had matured, but it doesn't mean that we've paid all the bills yet. It just means that when they matured, all of the money went into the bank account so I can pay it.
Okay.
We're
Perfect.
very close to having all of the bills paid. We meet monthly with Alan, I forget his last name, it begins with a D, but gives us all the spend down on all the primarily police and the library. And so we know when we need the money, but we no longer have it in the bonded portfolio. Whatever money that's left is in the bank account ready to pay bills. But we haven't finished paying all the bills, but will soon, very soon.
Okay, so follow up to that. Sorry, Tom.
Sure.
So in the streets and bridges line, then that's what's in, I guess my question is, in the accrued interest, there is none for all 4 months. So that money is sitting somewhere without making interest?
Well,
Sorry.
no. It just means that we've been paid all the interest that we are due.
Okay.
At the time Yeah, so on those investments, I could go into the PFM report and there's probably 4 pages for just streets and bridges. And I can see what the individual investments are, but evidently the investments we've made did not have any earned but not paid interest, any accrued interest to report.
Okay, thanks. I'm just trying to ask the questions that I know somebody sitting at home would, as they're looking at these documents, that's where my mind went. So just trying to voice those.
Great question. You saw how I stumbled. You know what? I will look into the investments and maybe give you a better idea why, but it's a great question.
Anybody else have any great questions? Does anybody have any not so great questions? This is not an action item. We're just receiving this report, correct, Bob? Okay. So the next one is continued business. I have no idea what continued business is, but is there any continued business? Doesn't look like it. Next item is new business. Is there any new business? I don't have any new business, but I just have a comment, Bob, and something you said kind of brought this up. And then I was also looking through the investments we have in non-treasury bonds and non-sort of governmental located things. And I know that many municipalities and other institutions, higher education, other nonprofits have an investment policy against investing in, say, Reynolds Tobacco or some industry that all they do is create military weapons. And I don't think we have any kind of policy in this council. Is that correct?
Yes, I believe that we have not restricted the state guidance on investment
Okay.
funds further. But you will see if you ever take a look at our stocks, they're blue chip, Apple and
Yeah, I saw Apple and I saw others, but I also saw one that gave me a big fright. But then I realized I saw BlackRock, and I went to Blackwater, and I'm thinking we don't want to invest in Blackwater. BlackRock, I'm sure, is something different. But I also saw Johnson & Johnson, and I do know just kind of peripherally, there's been some concern in various segments about Johnson & Johnson. And at some point, Bob, I'd like to have a little conversation with you about whether or not we want to institute as the council some sort of a policy that is against investing in certain types of corporations and businesses. And it's just preliminarily now, but that's something I'd like to put out on the future so we could look at it. And we may decide we don't have any of those investments. So do we need a policy like that if we don't have any investments? But I'd like to review that at some point, both our investments and what the companies we invest in do, and also whether we want some sort of, to recommend to the city some sort of investment policy and guidelines and what sort of industries we can invest in and we shouldn't invest in.
Sure. You'll notice that the corporate notes and commercial paper lines are a very small portion.
I realize. I realize that some of it is just like we condemn institutional racism and white supremacy.
No, you're right.
It sets the tone and sets the policy and makes a statement for what the city is interested in.
Yeah, I do think it's very hard to have a socially conscious. It's not that it can't be done, but I would want to research how other people have stumbled over this, because you might object. Look, the example I always give is the NRA. I've worked in cities where we had a policy that all donations had to be approved by the city council before we actually received them, because it could be a donation from a company that some people found, or an organization, objectionable. And so I mean, it is an important consideration, but I do think it would be very difficult to find out who is the authoritative source to see if they're violating?
Well, it might be Bob, but that's an item for, that's why I said it's new business. We're not going to hash this out today. And I will tell everybody that the reason we're 10 minutes over is due to your chair asking a lot of questions. So Mr. Barron, the CFO, did a terrific job of moving things along. Are there any other questions or comments from any other council member? In that case, we are to item 8, adjournment. This meeting is adjourned, and I'll see some of you in 45 minutes.